In 1938, two Swedish immigrants in Bridgeport, Connecticut, sent a $995 milling machine to a small casting company in Syracuse, New York. It weighed roughly 2,000 pounds. It had a turret that could swing 360 degrees, a ram that could slide forward and back, and a head that could tilt in any direction. Only a handful of New England tool rooms had ever seen anything like it. Over the next 80 years, more than 370,000 of those machines would be built. They would show up on aircraft carriers and submarine repair decks, in NASA prototype shops and Detroit tool rooms, in 10,000 square feet job shops and single-car garages. The word Bridgeport would stop acting like a brand and become a noun. The way machinists refer to any vertical knee mill, the way people say Kleenex when they mean tissue. Walk into any machine shop in North America today, point to any vertical mill on the floor, and ask the machinist what it is. Even if the casting says Jet or Acer or Grizzly, the answer will almost always be the same. That's a Bridgeport. This is the story of how a failed hedge trimmer became the backbone of American manufacturing. Gothenburg, Sweden, 1897. Rudolph Frederick Bow was born on April 15th into a country losing its working class to America. By age 13, his family had crossed the Atlantic and settled in Holyoke, Massachusetts, a mill town in the Connecticut River Valley filled with Scandinavian immigrants looking for factory work. Bow finished grammar school in Holyoke and apprenticed as a pattern maker, one of the most skilled trades in metalwork. A pattern maker carved precise wooden forms that were used to create sand molds for casting iron and steel parts. Every gear, every housing, every machine frame started as a wooden pattern before it became metal. It was meticulous, physical, creative work, and B.O. was good at it. By 1920, at 23, he had become foreman at Bridgeport Pattern and Model Works, a small shop on Cannon Street in Bridgeport, Connecticut. 7 years later, at 30, he bought the company outright. His savings covered part of it, and his mother loaned him $3,000 for the rest. 6 years after that, a young toolmaker named Magnus Wahlstrom would walk into the shop and alter the course of American manufacturing. Wahlstrom came from Surahammar, a small municipality in central Sweden, defined almost entirely by its 17th century ironworks, Surahammar. He had worked there as a young man, first in the office, then in the mechanical workshop, picking up tool-making skills in a town where iron was the only industry that mattered. In 1923, at 19 or 20, he immigrated to the United States. His first stop was Chicago, where he met Bow through the Swedish-American immigrant network. By 1929, Wahlstrom had followed Bow east to Bridgeport, and the two men became partners. Their first idea had nothing to do with milling machines. They spent more than a year trying to build an electric hedge clipper, a consumer product they hoped could carry them through the Depression. It did not work. The hedge trimmer never became a viable product. But while they were tinkering with it, a local company called Atlas Tool of Bridgeport asked them to build something else. A portable, self-contained quarter-horsepower, high-speed milling attachment. The kind of device a machinist could bolt onto an existing horizontal mill to do vertical cutting operations without buying a second machine. Bannow and Wahlstrom delivered. In 1932, they shipped their first universal milling attachment. It was small, fast, and practical, and it sold. By 1936, they had upgraded it to a half-horsepower head with a quill, a telescoping sleeve that let the spindle plunge straight down like a drill press. Machinists loved it, but they kept running into the same complaint. The attachment was excellent. The old horizontal mills they were bolting it onto were not. Sometime around 1936, during a delivery run, Bannow pulled out a paper bag and sketched the solution. Not an attachment, but a complete machine. A dedicated column and base designed from the ground up to hold their milling head. A machine lighter than anything else on the market, more versatile, and priced for the small shops that could never afford the massive single-purpose mills on factory floors. On August 8, 1938, they shipped the first one. Serial number 1 went to Precision Castings Corporation in Syracuse, New York. The price was $995. For context, a comparable single-purpose vertical mill then cost about $7,000. What made the machine different was not one feature, but the combination. The heavy cast iron base and column provided rigidity. The knee traveled up and down the column on an Acme lead screw, giving the machinist vertical control. On top of the knee sat the saddle, which moved front to back. and on top of the saddle sat the table, which moved left to right. 3 axes of motion, all hands cranked, all precise. But the real genius sat above the column. A turret sat on top that could rotate a full 360 degrees. Through that turret slid a horizontal ram, allowing the entire cutting head to be extended forward, retracted, or swung to any position, and the head itself could tilt in 2 planes, letting a machinist cut at compound angles without moving the workpiece. In April of 1939, Bannow filed for a patent. On March 3, 1942, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office granted patent number US 2275291A. The title read Machine Tool, operating at universal angles in overall locations. The company had already been incorporated as Bridgeport Machines Incorporated in 1939. The timing was almost too perfect. By December of 1941, the United States was at war. Factories across the country were converting to military production, and demand for machine tools exploded overnight. The War Production Board needed machines that were versatile, fast to set up, and simple enough that newly trained workers could operate them. The Bridgeport met every requirement. It was compact enough for a submarine repair shop and accurate enough to make aircraft components. The factory on Cannon Street ran around the clock 7 days a week and still couldn't keep up. By January 1945, Bridgeport had shipped its 5,000th machine. By 1948, the 10,000th. The company had completely abandoned pattern making. Every square foot of floor space was dedicated to building milling machines. In 1941, they added 2,400 square feet. In 1944, another 4,200. It still was not enough. One measure of how deeply the Bridgeport embedded itself in the war effort survives today aboard the USS Pompanito, a Bannow-class fleet submarine that completed 6 combat patrols in the Pacific. The Pompanito is now a museum ship at Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco, and in its machine shop, a vintage Bridgeport still sits bolted to the deck. It was recently fitted with a donated digital readout to help fabricate restoration parts. The machine is still making chips. After the war, the Bridgeport did not fade the way wartime products often do. It became the foundation of peacetime American manufacturing. It was the first machine a new shop would buy, the tool an apprentice learned on before touching anything computer-controlled. In December of 1951, the company moved into a massive new plant at 500 Lindley Street in Bridgeport, Connecticut. The first machine shipped from the new factory was serial number 14,476. Production milestones came faster. The 20,000th machine shipped by 1954, and the 100,000th followed in 1967. The machine kept evolving. The original M head gave way to the J head, a step pulley design with a 1-horsepower motor that introduced a tool holding system Bridgeport had designed from scratch, the R8 Collet. The R8 Collet was a taper that allowed for fast, secure tool changes, and it became so universally adopted that it became an open industry standard. Thousands of machines from dozens of manufacturers still use R8 Collets today, because Bridgeport designed the right answer the first time. By the late 1960s, the 2J head arrived with a variable speed drive, a continuously variable transmission that let the machinist dial spindles speed up or down without stopping the machine to move a belt. By then, Rudolph had become one of Connecticut's most prominent industrialists. In 1959, he was elected president of the National Association of Manufacturers, the most powerful trade organization in American industry. A testimonial dinner in his honor was held on May 2, 1960, at a hotel in Bridgeport. He was 63, the son of Swedish immigrants, a pattern maker who had bought a small shop with a $3,000 loan from his mother and turned it into the best-known name in machine tools. He died 2 years later in 1962 at 65. Magnus Wahlstrom took over leadership and guided the company through the rest of the decade. In 1968, Textron Incorporated, a Rhode Island conglomerate, bought Bridgeport machines for about $11 million. Forbes would later call the deal an early example of conglomeration hurting Bridgeport. Textron expanded the brand internationally, establishing manufacturing in the United Kingdom through the acquisition of Adcock Shipley with plants in Bridlington, Yorkshire, and Leicester. A Singapore assembly plant followed in 1980. At the time of the sale, Bridgeport employed roughly 1,000 workers. Under Textron, that number would eventually peak at around 2,500 across all locations. Textron also pushed Bridgeport into the emerging world of computer numerical control. In the 1970s, the company introduced the BOSS line, which stood for Bridgeport Operating Software System.